Welcome to episode number 4 of the Men and Community Podcast. On today's episode, Matt talks about taking inventory of the communities that we're a part of. Carlo shares the importance of identifying the value each community brings or receives. And both of us share the ways we try to make our communities just a little bit better. Thank you for being part of our community. All right, everyone. Welcome to episode 4 of the Men and Community Podcast. I'm Carlo.
I'm Matt.
And we're super excited to have you here. Today, we are going to talk about a couple of different things, but mostly it's going to be the concept of building the communities that we're a part of. So why don't we get started, as per usual, with our cards?
I love it. Shall I kick us off?
Yeah, do it.
All right. Okay, that's fantastic. What's the most embarrassing moment that you've witnessed? So this is really, really funny because like the only thing that I can think of was actually like I was the one getting embarrassed by this moment. And so I don't know if you were going to use that one, if that came to mind for you since you were there or not. But certainly like the most embarrassing moment I've witnessed that I can remember was certainly my own.
Okay, go. What was it?
You're drawing a blank, so I'll tell the story.
Yeah, I don't know.
This was fresh off of our recent trip to Costa Rica. And it was your birthday, and we had a few of our co-travelers just sitting and having a drink or two on the balcony of our hotel room, and heard a knock at the door, and as the good host of the hotel room party, thought I'd get up to open the door, not realizing that the screen door was still shut. On the door, and promptly did the classic, just smack right into the screen door. And yeah, just it obviously didn't hurt because it's a screen door. I might have broken the screen door of the hotel, actually. Maybe. We didn't really look that carefully, but definitely bruised the pride a little bit.
And see, that's the funny thing I think about embarrassing moments, is that everything is so worse to you because I barely remember that. And even at the time, now that I'm thinking about it, it was like, oh, okay, are you okay? Like, it's not as embarrassing as you think it is.
See, I think that means that you're a better friend than the other people that were on that balcony with us, because you certainly maybe weren't the one laughing the hardest, but there were some good giggles that happened.
Well, giggles are fine, but I don't know. It gets forgotten. Embarrassing moment for me. Oh, man.
Or that you've witnessed. It doesn't have to be your moment.
I'm having a hard time remembering one. Oh, no, I do remember one. Long time ago, I was driving a girlfriend at the time and her little sister downtown to go pick up her little sister's car. And for some reason or another, she had to go into this building to like get her car keys or something like that. And we're sitting in the car watching her, and she walks up to like a turnstile door and like grabs it and just starts pulling. And she can't
like a revolving door.
Yeah, she can't get the door open. And we're watching her, and we're like, does she not know what a revolving door is? And she's pulling and pulling. Finally, she like walks back to the car, and she's like, I think they're closed. And I'm like, no, darling, like push. And she pushes, and it goes about halfway in, and she like freaks out and backs away. And I was like, do you not know how a revolving door works?
Okay, can we pause here? I think this is a really good interjection, because I've experienced this too with some family of mine.
Okay.
And what I'm guessing is the same thing here, is that this is someone who has grown up in a less urban center.
Well, like grown up here in Calgary.
Oh, well then there's less excuse.
Yeah.
Okay, because and the reason why I want to contextualize that is I have part of my family lives about 2.5 hours outside of Calgary, and they've grown up most of their lives
Sure.
in a town that I believe is around 8 or 11,000 population wise. So relatively small. So for those of you who may be listening, coming from a smaller rural center, a revolving door is this door with a pin in the center, and you push it, and if you don't exit on the other side, you're basically, it's like the traffic circle of doors.
Sure.
And
the thing that is kind of like, messes with you a little bit is that once you get in, there's like this pressure that builds up inside the door, air pressure, and it becomes harder.
Psychological pressure.
It becomes harder to push the door. So you start to second guess yourself whether like it's like stopped or not. Also, you can't have really more than one person in a section at a time, or else you get stuck and you end up like shuffling against each other. So when I finally ended up taking her through the door, we had to do this little shuffle. And when we came out the other side, she like burst through and like stumbled and almost fell. And it was just this moment of like,
beautiful.
She's like, I never want to do one of those again. I'm like, well, you should get used to it. There's lots in downtown Calgary. But it was just this kind of cute, embarrassing moment because, of course, like I was in my early 20s. So like this was like kind of like little sister. She was like 16 or 17 at the time. It was, I don't know. It was funny.
Beautiful. Good old revolving doors.
Good old revolving doors. All right, what do I got? What body part are you most attracted to?
Nice. Here we go. I will also pause here to note it that I think you put like a 13-year-old rating on our podcast. Did I notice that right? It wasn't family. There was a specific rating.
Was there?
That was like slightly above what we earlier episodes said was
PG,
PG
13. I didn't intentionally do that.
Great. So it means we can talk about body parts. That's great.
Yeah. What body part are you most attracted to? Oh man, I'm going to get labeled as a weirdo if I answer this honestly.
Oh, this is great.
But I have to.
It's episode 5. If they're still with us.
It's 4. It's episode 4.
There's that bonus one in here. So anyway, it's episode 4.
No,
they know where we are.
I'm gonna share it, and hopefully you guys will still like me after. It's the shoulders.
Nice.
Yeah, it's the shoulders and like the upper back. Like I don't know if you've ever seen like a girl who like wears one of those shirts that's shoulderless. Like they still got sleeves, but it's shoulderless. Mwah.
So what is it about the shoulder? Tell me about what it is about the shoulder that...
Well, in particular, if you're, this girl is a little bit more muscular, I just feel like it's a symbol of strength. It's very elegant on a woman too. Like if you look at a man's shoulders, they're very, very profound, right? The delts form, even if you're not a gym guy.
Maybe yours are.
Quiet you. It's a very obvious, like kind of like ball, right?
Yeah.
Where on a woman, it has this like beautiful, elegant kind of flow between the neck down into the shoulders and the arms. And I just think it's one of those things that encompasses the female form. And I think it's very attractive.
Okay. All right. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me it's butts.
Okay.
That's not. I'm not gonna lie. I definitely a butt guy. However, I will then add another body part because I feel like that's almost a cop out. Because
no, you gotta stick with it now.
It's but that is what it is. I will say though that on both women and men, what I really appreciate is ankles, and the reason why is I've always maintained that. You show me somebody and I will tell you how athletic they are based on their ankles.
Sure.
And I think the amount of definition in the transition from the calf to the ankle, whether it's athletic, frail, there's all sorts of different things that I can tell about how athletic you are. And so, and this is coming from somebody who played a position in a sport where I was very large, like 280, 290 pounds at one point in my career. And so if you look at me from the waist up, I don't look like an athlete. But I'd like to think if you looked at me from the knee down, looked athletic as hell.
For those of you on video, Matt does have some very attractive calves.
It's awkward because I'm wearing wool socks. So I don't know.
Yeah,
know if
right now we're not going to look,
calves.
but take my word for it.
We're going to have to up that rating on the podcast if we start showing calves.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's too much.
So butts and ankles, that's where we're at.
All right. So now that we have creeped out half of our audience, we would like you to know that we pick these cards at random. We do not think of them ahead of time. So what you get is what you get. We're sorry. Okay.
Kind of like us.
Yeah.
What you get is what you
very,
get.
very true. All right. So we were discussing kind of before we started recording that we've made it through our 3.5 episodes, 3.5.5 episodes. And, you know, we've given what we feel is a good foundation for who we are and what kind of the premise of this podcast is going to be. And now we want to start diving a little bit deeper into kind of the meat and potatoes of why we feel or what we want to share and what we want to encourage with this podcast. And it's such an all-encompassing idea for us that we have so much to talk about, but we want to continue down this trend of really focusing in on community because it is obviously very important to our podcast. So the way I would like to start it off is maybe for those people that are just starting to think about this idea of community in their life. Like, you know, community is not a new concept, but there comes a point where you actually start to think about the actualities of it in your life and you start to label them. You start to look through your friendships and your relationships with people and you start to actually try and identify what those communities are.
And I think too, sorry to jump in, I think that certain things happen in your life where you start to realize that you need to rely on a community.
Yeah.
And I think and we talked about this in an earlier episode to a certain extent, but I think doing some proactive work to understand what communities you are a part of, which gets a little bit at what we're going to be after today, helps you when you reach a point when something like this happens, you're better equipped to know where to turn.
Yes. I've always believed very heavily in self-assessment, right? Like you can't know your fitness level until you do a fitness test. You can't you can't know how good you are at a particular topic or subject or skill until you try it, right? And the same comes from trying to expand any portion of your life. You know, if you want to create better relationships, you have to analyze the relationships. If you want to become a better person, you have to analyze the person you already are. So in that spirit of analyzing your existing communities, the place that I think is usually best to start is along the lines of what is the purpose of this particular community, because you can have several great communities in your life and they can all serve a little bit of a different purpose. And I'll give you an example. I have one friendship group. It's made up mostly of people from high school, and I adore these guys. They're wonderful, wonderful people. They are what I refer to as my recharge group, right? So I know that when we get together, it is very lighthearted. You know, we talk a little bit about life and the things that are going in on it, but we also talk a lot about, you know, the great times of the past, and we have fun and we play board games and you know, we do silly gift exchanges at Christmas time and all that kind of stuff. But they are my recharge group, where I have a group that's, you know, made up of you and several of our friendships, where I would talk more about our growth group, right? The conversations. Do we do silly things? Absolutely. But the conversations that we have tend to be about, you know, more serious matters. They're things about where are you going in life and what are the concerns that you're having and how can we grow together. So I think a really big part of figuring out the communities that you have is identifying the ones you already have and the purposes that you serve. What do you kind of think about that?
So this is really, really interesting to me. And I think that again, just to loop back, our theme here is really how do we look to build on the communities that we have. And so I really love the idea that in order to improve anything, you need to really have a fully formed idea of what the current state is.
Yeah.
Right. So many of us, I don't know about you, I work in a nonprofit, so evaluation is a big part of this shtick. And you know, evaluation is hated on by most people, but it's so important because if you don't have baseline information, how are you supposed to demonstrate any sort of impact? So in order to do that, we need to identify first, right? So I love that. I love the idea of having a recharge community. I love that place where you go and you feel safe and you just get energy back.
Yeah.
I love the idea of a growth community. I love that idea of a place where you go where you know you're going to be challenged where you know that you're going to have the opportunity to step outside of your comfort zone, learn something new, do something new, try something new. I also think it's really interesting too, because a lot of communities maybe don't need to be thought of in those terms. Like I think that a lot of communities are going to be marked by a shared interest or a shared commonality, right? So whether you're fans of a particular sport or sports team, right? I'm a huge Toronto Raptors fan, huge Calgary Stampeders fan, right? So I then identify with communities of people that happen to cheer for those things. You know, so I think that the exercise is an interesting one of being able to go and label who are my recharge people, what are the people that I cheer, I get behind on the same page with, right? What are these different groups? It's really about associating with groups, and as much as we did this in high school, where we labeled the jocks and the geeks and all those things. Group identification matters because it's important to have an understanding or a perspective of where you exist.
Yeah, and it's intriguing to me. I want to dive a little bit more into this, what you mentioned about like the associating over a common interest. In particular, the sports one. Like I can see the community over a common interest because I'm a big video gamer. In particular, one video game.
That would be a huge community of interest too.
It is, absolutely. Yeah. But it's also an activity we do together. We play that game together. So we've formed that community over a shared experience of living in this world of this video game. Where I've never really been a sports guy. Like watching sports, I love playing them. I don't really watch them. Like when I came over tonight, you were watching the basketball game. I would never just put the basketball game on by myself. If I was having friends over, for sure, but never just on my own. So I guess what I'm getting at here is this idea that what is it that you find you gain or you enjoy out of, having this shared interest in a sport that you are just kind of watching, because you're never going to play on the Toronto Raptors, right?
Oh, never. not even if I was the last basketball player. Okay, so and I think this actually is really interesting because we're able to loop back to a previous conversation we had in an earlier episode. We as human beings have evolved in such a way that we are naturally going to look for people that are like us. It's this very tribal orientation with how we've evolved, right? We've evolved in groups of people that, for a long period of history were nomadic, and then we settled in certain places and all these things happened. And so there was always this sense of, I'm going to form closer bonds with the people that are in my group, my community, my tribe, my municipality. And usually that would happen at the expense of somebody else. Right? For us, the big municipal rivalry is Calgary versus Edmonton. Sure. I bond with people who are from Calgary largely at the expense of people from Edmonton.
Shout out to the two people on our Costa Rica trip.
That's right. They're the worst because they're from that city. Anyway, so this is kind of how I think sports fandom comes to be. You build these bonds, whether it's because you grew up cheering for them or they're from your geographical municipality or whatever, they you build these bonds cheering for these people, and then their successes, their triumphs become yours because it's this ingrained evolutionary sense of this community, this connection that we have with a certain group at the expense of others, which is really what competitive sports is all about.
Okay, so really you're sharing the thrill and camaraderie of winning a competition
or defeat.
Sure.
Defeat. I think the community becomes just as strong. I mean, nothing you love better than when your team loses at the end of the season, and then you get to come together with the rest of your fans and bitch about why it is that they lost and what they need to do to get better. Right? So that galvanizes a group almost as much as winning some sort of a championship would.
Okay. Like, and it's not to say I don't understand the concept of team sports, because like I said, I play lots of sports. It's just never been my I've never been drawn to the idea of watching them as much. So,
Right.
but I get what you're saying. I thought that would be kind of intriguing. And I guess this stems or swings itself back around to the next thing that I kind of wanted to bring up is that once you've kind of identified the groups that you have in your life and you've identified maybe what their purpose is a little, or maybe that they don't have one.
Yeah.
Right. Like you said, because not every group needs to have a particular purpose. I think more importantly is you need to identify whether that community is one that brings value to you or it's one that you bring value to. And it can be both. It can be a two-way street. I would say our relationship in our community is very much a two-way street. But I'll give another example is that I had the honor of being part of a men's group over COVID. And it was a great group, fantastic guys. I have nothing but good things to say about them. But I found that during our conversations, I felt like I was giving way more knowledge and maybe nuggets isn't the right word, but just the way I speak. I felt I was giving way more than I was walking away from those sessions with.
Right.
I felt like I wasn't learning or gaining enough from it. And because our group was focused around this idea of growth as men, and I wasn't growing from it, I ended up eventually walking away and saying, I appreciate the group for everything that it is, but I don't think it's in line with me right now. And at the time, I felt really poor about it. But after a while, I realized, similar to that concept I mentioned a couple episodes ago, is you have a very finite amount of energy available to you, and you have to be selective about where that energy goes. And the energy I was giving into that group wasn't serving me enough, right? Because sometimes pouring into someone or pouring into a group and seeing the positive impact that is making provides you with your own energy back. I wasn't getting that from the group. So I ended up having to kind of walk away, right? And the flip side of that, and I'm blessed, I don't think I've been part of many groups like this, but the other side of that is that, this group is just detrimental to you, right? It proves no value for you. You're not getting anything from it. You don't know if you're giving anything to it. And the people inside of it maybe are just not at the same stage of life or on the same wavelength as you. And they're more damaging to you than anything, right? So I think it's really important that we identify, what's the flow of energy in this group, right?
And I think that's really really interesting. So early on in the pandemic, I wrote a list of people, and it feels really really crass almost, but the list was titled "The List of People That I Would Risk Getting COVID For."
I remember,
right?
this.
And this is back in earlier mid 2020 when death rates were incredibly high, and there wasn't the opportunity for full understanding of the full ramifications of COVID-19, and it was still a very scary thing. And I wrote this list of who are these people that I feel like I would risk COVID for, not knowing what we know now or think we know now about it. And it was a really interesting exercise because it's really doing a lot of what you're saying. It was, for me, it was identifying what groups I'm a part of, because it was a list of friends and family and people that are very meaningful in my life for different reasons and purposes. Some because they're just people that I love and appreciate. Yeah. Some because they're mentors to me. Others because I like to think I play some mentorship role in their life, right? And it's this very different dynamic. And so, but the same concept, right? So I had to identify the people. I had to identify the ones that were of value. And in doing so, you start to create this appreciation of who might not be serving you.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I feel like that is a very important thing to do. And I think what's kind of cool about this entire concept of identifying your communities is that whenever I've encouraged somebody to do this, especially somebody who felt that they didn't have a lot of people in their life that they could, really feel close to, as they start to identify these people, and these communities around them, they start to realize I actually have more people than I thought I did. But then they also start to realize that maybe they haven't pulled their weight in maintaining that relationship, right? And we're all guilty of this. It's actually, believe it or not, one of the things that I feel I need the most improvement in is that I form some really good relationships, and then time goes by and life gets in the way, and unfortunately I'm not the best at following up with those relationships. So time, eventually all of a sudden that person will pop into my head and I go, man, I haven't talked to that person in 6 months. And then I'll pick up the phone and I'll call them, but I feel guilty. That 6 months should have never gone by without a quick little text message. And again, it's a two-way street. But as you start to identify these communities, you might come across this idea of, I haven't done what I needed to do to grow this community, and grow that connection with the community. So this might be a good time to kind of transition into a couple of things that maybe we can do on a personal level to try and grow the communities that we're already a part of, that, try and form that deeper connection, and maybe, find ourselves more influential or more influenced by these communities on a day-to-day basis.
Awesome. I like that. So for those of you that are keeping really good lists, I'm very much a list person. So step one, we're really trying to make a list. We're identifying what are the groups that we feel like we are a member of, or that we participate in, right? Next, what is the value of that group? And, we talk about energy exchange and how much we're giving to other groups. That's still valuable to us as long as it's in a healthy situation.
Yeah.
Right. And so I would just like to frame it as, just because we're offering something to a community, to a group, it doesn't mean it's not of value to us.
Yes.
So we need to identify the groups, understand they're valuable. Okay, great. We've done that. We know that these are the groups that we're a part of. These are the ones that we find valuable, that we'd like to continue to being a part of. Now we want to make them better, right? Like, that's what we're here for. We want to, just like I used to learn in Scouts all the time, you want to leave that campsite cleaner than you found it, right? So you want to make things better. What things do you do? How do you show up in your communities to try to make them a better place?
I think for me, one of the big things that I love to do is I like to be the guy that asks all the questions, right? I want to know how your life is going. What was your big win lately? Are you happy with things? Are you dissatisfied with something? I want to know all of those things because I like to be everybody's biggest fan, right? If you're going to, oh, well, life is fine. Life is fine is not an answer for me. I'm sorry. I won't let that go. I'll be like, cool. What about life is fine, right? What has gone well? What has gone wrong? And then when you tell me, oh, this is the thing that's gone well, I will dive so hard into that, because my biggest gripe is that we don't celebrate each other's wins enough. And we most certainly do not celebrate our own wins enough.
Yeah.
So if you're not going to do it and I'm your friend, you better trust I'm going to do it. So that for me is one of the biggest ways that I can influence and grow my community.
Cool. I really, really like that. A couple that I'm really fond of and I'm trying to integrate more into my life. I think that food is such a beautiful way of building community. Obviously, I don't need to tell you this.
No, my mother would agree with
you. Yeah, you come by that very honestly. But I think that food has this beautiful way of bringing people together. And I'll give you an example. When you go to a party or a gathering of any type, I think that you end up with a situation where the food is really telling of how tight-knit the community is, right? Is it a kind of gathering where you've just got bowls of chips that are sitting around the table? Now, some of you in North America might have just been watching the National Football Championship for college football, or you might be getting ready for the NFL playoffs coming up. Either way, I don't want to bash you for just having bowls of chips on the table. The point is, there's a big difference between a bowl of chips on the table and someone who's taken the time to bake a homemade spinach and artichoke dip, sure, or make a homemade guacamole. And I think that there is just something so uniting about somebody who is going to go out of their way and create a beautiful dish or use food in some way to build community. So I think for me, I really encourage anyone who's looking to build a community just to really simply take a look at what the food is. And I know that that's a challenging thing right now, that food is very expensive. But I would say that when possible, and it doesn't have to be extravagant by any means, but something that's homemade from the heart is usually going to come across better than store-bought in a bag. The second one that I would say is that you really want to think about the exchange of gifts. And I'm not talking about like you're going out, you're buying presents for people as a part of your community. You know, I don't know about you, but I know that my default setting when I go to somebody's home for the first time and they offer me a glass of water or a beverage, my first instinct is to say, oh, no, that's fine. I'm okay. I had a bottle of water before I came, right? Yeah. I don't want to put somebody out. Yes. I don't want to feel like an imposition. I don't want them to feel like they have to serve me, right? But then you got to realize what that feels like on the other side. And this offer that has then been rejected, even though you're doing it with the best of intentions, you're still rejecting their offer. And so what I would say is from a community standpoint, one of the ways that I really like to be able to build community is to both offer and receive. And more often than not, it's harder to receive, even if it's just that glass of water at the door. Yeah. But that act of, I have offered you something and you've taken it. I don't care if it's a tissue or a glass of water or whatever, a place to hang your coat. Mm-hmm. That offer and acceptance is such a critical part to me of feeling closer to an individual person, to a community, whatever. If there's that offer, that acceptance, that's what, for me, brings communities closer together.
Yeah. I want to touch on both of those. So with the food concept, like you said, I very much empathize with that. In Italian culture, one of the most common ways that you've made a really strong bond with an Italian family when they invite you over to cook with them, right? So for New Year's, my mom and my dad had all of the kids and a whole bunch of people from our office over, and we all collectively cooked. We had pizza and pizzacina and pizza frita and all these Italian dishes that I won't explain. You can look them up. But we all cooked together, and then some people brought stuff with them, and it was this big communal meal over wine and conversation. And we didn't need anything in the background to enjoy ourselves there. We just needed that, right? And I would agree. Like I say all the time that my mom's love language is food, right? If she can feed you, she knows that you're cared for. And then further to your comment about saying no to someone, that you never, ever, ever say no to my mother if she offers you something. Like even as her child, I know this because I'll get beat. I'm not saying she'll beat you, but I'll get beat.
So if I say no, you'll get beat?
No, you'd get beat. She knows who you are.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah.
That's another way you're part of the family.
That's right. Yeah. Or if you told me you're too skinny. Not that my mother speaks that way, but it's fun. So yeah, food is a big part, and giving is a big part. That's when you know that you're getting the full effort of that community. It's like, hey, how can I make your life easier, your life better? That's when you know that they're really extending themselves to you.
Yeah.
And when you're willing to take that offer up, or even alternatively offer something back in return, like, bringing the bottle of wine when you're going over for dinner, or bringing, a dish of your own or something like that. It kind of really helps to form that bond. And it's so interesting that we're talking about this, because one of the thoughts that I had coming into the new year was this feeling that that I very commonly am not holding up my end of the bargain when it comes to food or money,
Interesting.
And I know that this may be more of an internal thing because I've had nobody raise any issues with me. But it's very common that I find just out of pure scheduling conflict, I sometimes will arrive somewhere without something with me. And I always feel bad about it. Or for example, you and I might go out with some of our friends, and just through the who pulls their card out of the pocket first, who actually ends up paying for things at the end of the night, I feel doesn't equal out, right? So I've made a real active effort moving into the new year to try and bring more things with me and try to offer to pay more often and all that kind of stuff. And I don't think that really matters to many of my friends. We all have this, give and take kind of friendships, but it's that act of saying, I've got this one, right? Or here's this thing I brought, that I think is really, really important in the dynamics of a relationship.
And I think that one of the last pieces that I would add to that is it doesn't always have to be a thing. We've talked about food. We've talked about exchanging tissues, glasses of water, whether it's, grabbing the next round of drinks, whatever that thing is. It doesn't have to be a thing, a tangible thing. But it's understanding what your gift is and what you're bringing, what you're showing up with. Because all of us need community at different times for different reasons, but we never want to be in a position where we are a consistent strain on our community.
Yes.
And so every community that you're a part of, you need to understand what the gift is that you bring your community. And it could be a different gift for every community, and that could be a really hard question to answer for a lot of reasons. And so I think that if I could really kind of capture what we've been talking about in this episode, it's that we need to first identify those communities, being really conscious and intentional about knowing what groups that we're a part of. It's about understanding whether those groups are serving us, and then we can start to make some hopefully not hard, but maybe challenging decisions about whether the groups that we're a part of, those communities that we're in, are serving us. I think that you're really lucky to have a really beautiful continued relationship with your friends from high school. But I know that for a lot of people, those friends, those relationships from your childhood maybe aren't healthy, right? And I know that may be the case. So we maybe need to re-examine that.
Yeah.
And then third, what are the gifts that you're bringing? Is it food? Is it your time, right? Like, is it that text message here or there? The gift that you can provide to communities is so often just yourself.
Yeah.
And it's being available, being present, being in that moment with them at that given time. And it's about understanding what the value of those certain offerings that you can bring is. And I think that in a very broad way, that's what building community is. And we both agreed today before we started recording that this concept of building community is one that's going to merit a lot more work, a lot more discussion into the future. And we're really conscious of time, and we want to be respectful of all of you that have committed this time, and we're committing to staying kind of under that 40-minute mark with each episode. And so in saying that, we want to make sure that we're able to go deeper and dive further later on in some of these topics. And so I think that, I don't know, where are you feeling? What do you think about all this now?
I think we've really scratched barely the surface of the whole topic of community, but my hope with this episode is that we've provided a little bit of actionable item.
Yeah.
And I think if I were to provide one closing thought, is that understand the preciousness of yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Like we've put a very big focus on this episode about, what our communities are for us, but also acknowledge just how important you are to this equation, because there are many communities that would be severely reduced if it wasn't for your involvement. So don't ever discredit yourself for just how important you are in other people's lives.
Yeah. I would sum it up with 4 words: bring food, spend time.
I like it. Bring food and spend time. That's a good one. Okay, so should we end off with our things we value in each other then?
Yeah, I love it. I'd like to start. I am feeling just immense gratitude for you. I mean, I do all the time, but in this moment, I'm feeling really, really grateful that you do always take the time to ask those questions, be that question guy that you're talking about. I think that, you're someone that I rely on a lot when a lot of the time I'm the one that's giving that energy to others, or that's how it feels to me. And I love it, but still need those people for both growth and recharge. So thank you for being both my growth and recharge person.
You're welcome. And that is very much a two-way street for us, because of course everybody's lives and relationships ebb and flow, and it seems that we are always able to kind of back and forth between that when we need it. So that is very much appreciated as well. For me, I think what I value from you right now the most is just this idea of your companionship, right? We've had the wonderful blessing to spend a fair amount of time with each other over the last little bit over a month, and there has not been a single moment of it that I haven't valued. And regardless of what we're doing, the conversations we're having, or who we're with, there's always this level of like this connection that I feel with you in the room, right? And to me, that is so valuable to have, that it's always there, no matter, we could be kilometers apart, but that connection is always there, and I value that very heavily. And I value the time that you've given me to spend time with you over the last little bit as well.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you for joining us. We're going to conclude it there. And as always, you can find us on all of your favorite social media platforms, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts, YouTube. You can find us on all of the major podcast platforms. It was a massive pain in the butt, but we're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, Podcast Addict, all those guys. So take a look for us. You'll find us. If you value our show, share it with someone, please. We said earlier in our first episode that it doesn't matter to us whether it's 10 people or 100 people, 1,000 people that listen to this. But if there's value in what you hear, share it with someone so that they could hopefully get that value. And of course, as we've always said, if you have a feedback, or you have a comment or a request or something along those lines, please don't hesitate to share them with us. We want to hear all your stuff.
Yeah, and likewise, if there's a certain way that you like to contribute to the communities that you're a part of, let us know that too. We talked about a few today, but we know there's so many more. We'd love to hear what you have.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Take care.